On December 4th, 1872, the brigantine Mary Celeste was discovered unmanned in the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of the Azores Islands. It wasn't wrecked, nor was there any evidence of a struggle. Everything about the ship suggested that the crew had left it just as they would for an ordinary day at sea. But where were they? In this video, we will discuss what happened to the crew of the Mary Celeste. The captain's wife and daughter were among those who disappeared. But before we continue, please take some time to subscribe to my channel. One dark and stormy night in late November 1872, Captain Benjamin Briggs, his wife Sophia, and their 2-year-old daughter, along with 7 other crew members, were sailing on the Mary Celeste through the rough seas of the Atlantic, when suddenly the ship sprung a leak and began to sink. As the men scrambled to bail out the water, the captain's wife and child hid under the floorboards of their cabin in an attempt to escape the rising tide. However, as the ship continued to fill with water, it became clear that there was no hope of saving themselves. So as the icy waters closed in around them, they clung to each other for dear life and prayed that they would be rescued. Unfortunately, this is just one of the many spooky stories that have been told about the Mary Celeste, also known as the ghost ship. But how accurate are these tales, and what really happened to the passengers on board? It all started back in 1872 when the Mary Celeste set sail from New York City bound for Genoa, Italy. The ship was carrying a cargo of industrial alcohol and other goods and was crewed by 8 men under the command of Captain Benjamin Briggs, a veteran sailor with years of experience at sea. There was also a father and son duo, Thomas and Charles Oliver, as well as several other crew members. But there were 2 additional passengers on board. Captain Briggs' wife, Sophia, and his 2-year-old daughter, also named Sophia. The journey began uneventfully, and the ship was making good progress toward its destination. The weather was calm, and there were no signs of trouble ahead. Then suddenly, on November 25th, everything changed. A violent storm rolled in, and the Mary Celeste was caught in its path. The wind howled, and the waves crashed against the hull of the ship, threatening to tear it apart. As the storm raged on for days, the crew struggled to keep the Mary Celeste afloat. They battled the elements, bailing out water and making repairs to the sails, desperately trying to keep the ship on course. Then on November 29, the storm finally began to subside, and the crew saw a break in the clouds. They had made it through the worst of the weather, and now they could start the long journey to Genoa. But as they began to relax, they made a horrifying discovery. The pumps used to remove water from the ship were broken, and there was no way to fix them in the middle of the vast ocean. With the pumps out of commission, the crew knew that they were in danger. They needed to get the ship to shore as quickly as possible before it was too late. They began to row the lifeboat, but within minutes it had disappeared over the horizon. With the lifeboat gone, the crew was stranded. They were alone in the middle of the ocean with a broken ship and dwindling supplies. They rationed their food and water, hoping that they would be rescued soon. But as the days passed, they began to lose hope. On December 4th, the Mary Celeste was discovered by another ship, the captain of which noticed that it looked abandoned. He sent a crew to investigate, but no one was on board. The ship was still intact, but there was no sign of the crew anywhere. The only clue as to what had happened was a lifeboat on the deck, which indicated that the crew had left the ship in a hurry. As news of the Mary Celeste's disappearance spread, rumors began to circulate. Some said that the crew had been taken by pirates, while others claimed that they had mutinied against Captain Briggs. Still, others believed that the ship had struck a hidden reef and sunk, leaving only the alcohol cargo intact. All these stories added to the mystery, leaving people to wonder what really happened to the Mary Celeste and her crew. Today, the Mary Celeste remains one of the most famous unsolved mysteries of the sea. Her story has captured the imaginations of writers, filmmakers, and sailors alike. In the years since her disappearance, there have been countless theories put forward to explain what happened to the ship and her crew. From navigational failure to piracy, no stone has been left unturned in the search for answers. Some believe that the crew of the Mary Celeste made a fatal error in navigation, leading them to believe that they were in more danger than they actually were. With the pumps out of commission, they may have misjudged the amount of water in the ship's hold, believing it to be in greater peril than necessary. This panic may have caused them to abandon ship in the lifeboat, leaving behind their belongings and even their captain and his family. However, this theory is challenged by the fact that the cargo of alcohol remained on board and untouched, suggesting that the crew did not intend to abandon ship. Furthermore, the lifeboat was found on the deck, indicating that the crew left the ship in a hurry. If they had realized the next morning that they had made a mistake, they likely would have returned to the ship instead of rowing away in the lifeboat. Others believe that the crew was taken by pirates, but there is no evidence to support this theory. Pirates typically targeted ships for their cargo, and the Mary Celeste was carrying a valuable load of alcohol. However, the pirates would have likely taken the entire cargo and not left it behind. Additionally, there were women and children on board, and pirates were known to take prisoners if they believed it would make them more money. But in this case, there was no evidence of a struggle or ransom demands, which would have been common if the crew had been taken by pirates. Still, others believe that the crew mutinied against Captain Briggs, but there's no evidence to support this theory either. A mutiny would have been a drastic measure and would have likely resulted in violence, yet there was no evidence of a struggle on board. Additionally, there was no reason for the crew to mutiny as the ship was on course for its destination and there were no signs of trouble ahead. What really happened to the crew of the Mary Celeste remains a mystery, but it is clear that they did not intend to abandon ship. The cargo was left behind and there was no evidence of a struggle or foul play. The most likely explanation is that the crew made a fatal error in judgment and believed that they were in greater danger than they actually were. This caused them to abandon ship in the lifeboat, leaving behind their belongings and their captain's family. But the truth is, we may never know what really happened to the crew of the Mary Celeste. The ship was found seaworthy yet deserted, with the last entry in the captain's log being 9 days prior. The cargo and supplies on board were untouched, suggesting that the crew had left the vessel suddenly and unexpectedly. This has led to numerous theories over the years, but without any concrete evidence, we can only speculate as to what happened to them. The Mary Celeste continues to fascinate people over 150 years after she was found. It is one of the most enduring mysteries of the sea and has inspired countless stories, including those by Morgan Robertson and Stephen King. The disappearance of the entire crew, along with the strange circumstances surrounding the ship's abandonment, has kept audiences captivated for decades. Perhaps the most compelling aspect of the Mary Celeste is that we may never know what truly happened to her crew. The lack of answers leaves us with a sense of unease and wonder, forcing us to confront the unknown and the possibility that some mysteries may never be solved. Now, if you want to learn more about the mysterious circumstances surrounding the disappearance of the Mary Celeste, I highly recommend checking out the additional resources provided below. These sources offer further insights into the various theories and investigations surrounding the case, providing a deeper understanding of this haunting maritime mystery. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe and come back soon for another exciting video.